Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into something today that you guys have been asking about a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the environmental impact of paper packaging. We found this really interesting report called Unwrapping a Disaster.
Okay.
And it digs deep into all the hidden costs of this industry that's just booming right now.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to figure out, is it really the eco-friendly hero we all think it is?
Hmm.
Or is it actually maybe a villain in disguise?
Yeah. It's easy to think that paper's, being made from trees.
Right.
It must be good for the planet.
Yeah.
But this report really takes that assumption and turns it on its head.
Okay, so let's start with something I think we've all experienced.
Okay.
Ordering something tiny online, and it shows up in like this huge box, 5 times the size,
Oh, yeah.
packed with enough paper. It's like they're trying to protect a Fabergé egg or something.
Right. It's like the irony of trying to be, a conscious consumer.
Right.
And then you just end up with this mountain of waste.
Yeah, totally. And it's not just us. This report has some crazy statistics.
Oh, yeah.
In the EU, the average person is throwing away 10 kilograms more paper packaging every year than they did 10 years ago.
10 kilos. That's like 2 bowling balls of trash.
Yeah, it's insane. So what's causing all this paper packaging anyway?
Well, there's two main things going on.
Okay.
First, you've got that huge boom in online shopping, especially because of the pandemic.
Right, makes sense. More deliveries, more packaging.
Exactly. And then on top of that, there's this big push to get rid of single-use plastics for food.
So basically, paper is taking over where plastic used to be.
Pretty much. But the question is it actually a sustainable solution?
Right, so what's the report say about that?
It's pretty blunt. It says straight up that paper is not a good alternative,
Wow.
especially when you look at the overall impact it has on the planet.
Okay, so let's talk numbers. The report said 3 billion trees are cut down every year
Yeah.
just for paper packaging.
It's crazy. And get this, 70% of that is roundwood.
Roundwood.
Yeah, that's freshly cut trees, not recycled stuff, or leftover wood from other industries.
Wow, that's a lot more than I thought. So it's not just about the trees themselves. It's like the whole process of making it is the problem.
Right. The whole industry uses tons of water and energy,
Mm-hmm.
and it pollutes the air and water like crazy. Not exactly what you picture when you think of paper,
No, I always think of like forests and, fresh air, not some big polluter.
Yeah, well, this report talks about these skeletal monocultures that the industry promotes.
Skeletal monocultures. What are those?
Okay, so picture this, a forest that's not really a forest at all.
Okay.
It's just rows and rows of the same tree, usually eucalyptus.
Huh. So no diversity, just one type as far as you can see.
Exactly like a giant cornfield,
Mm.
but instead of corn, it's trees that are getting turned into paper.
Gotcha. So why is that bad?
Well, one thing is they're really easy to catch fire.
Oh, right. All those trees so close together?
Yeah, one spark, and the whole thing can go up in flames.
Wow.
Plus, they use up a ton of water, and they hurt the soil.
Yikes. It's like an ecological disaster waiting to happen.
Pretty much. And the report actually tells the story of this filmmaker from Portugal.
Yeah, I saw that. Fernando Amaral.
Right. He lost everything in those wildfires a few years ago.
His house, his belongings, everything just gone.
Yeah, it was awful. And those fires were fueled by those eucalyptus plantations.
It's hard to believe that Portugal is like the biggest eucalyptus pulp producer in all of Europe.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
And they're still trying to figure out how to regulate the industry.
Even though it's such a big risk.
It's a battle between making money now and protecting the environment later.
Yeah. That seems to be a common theme, unfortunately, and this isn't just a Portugal problem.
Yeah.
The report talks about how Finland used to be this huge carbon sink.
Right, absorbing more CO2 than it released.
Exactly, but now it's actually a net emitter of carbon dioxide.
And a lot of that is because they're cutting down so many trees.
To meet the demand for paper?
It all comes full circle. And it's even worse when you consider that new bioproduct mill they're building.
Yeah, I read about that. It's supposed to be more sustainable.
Right, but some environmental groups are saying it's going to lead to even more logging.
Which would make the carbon sink problem even worse.
Exactly. It's like, how do you even tell what's truly sustainable anymore?
So it sounds like it's not as simple as just choosing paper over plastic.
Nope. It's about the whole system of disposable packaging and whether that's even a good idea in the first place.
Okay, so how do we even start to fix that?
Well, this report does a really good job of connecting all these dots.
Like the fires in Portugal and the logging in Finland.
Yeah, it shows how they're all part of this global system that puts profits ahead of the environment and people.
And of course, those big industries have a lot of power to keep things the way they are.
Oh, yeah, they definitely do. Speaking of which, the report has this really interesting case study from Chile.
Oh, yeah. What's happening there?
So Chile's a big exporter of agricultural products.
Okay.
And a lot of their land has been turned into pine and eucalyptus monocultures,
Yeah,
for the paper industry.
right.
And that's pushed out a lot of indigenous communities, especially the Mapuche people.
So it's not just about the environment, then it's about social justice too.
It really shows how even those everyday choices, like buying a paper cup or ordering something online,
Right.
have these huge consequences we might not even realize.
It's definitely a lot to think about, makes you really question what it means to be a responsible consumer.
And this is just the beginning. In the next part, we're going to dive into how the paper industry actually uses its power.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
to control what people think and even how governments make decisions.
Can't wait to hear about that.
Mm.
So before we got into those stories from Portugal and Finland and Chile, you were saying something about the paper industry and how they control what people think.
Yeah, this report goes deep into how the industry lobbies
Yeah.
to make sure everyone keeps thinking papers is great.
So we're all basically falling for some big marketing scheme.
Kind of. What are some of those myths we all believe?
Well, I always thought paper's biodegradable, so it's not really harming the environment.
The good old biodegradable argument. It's true that paper does decompose eventually, but the report points out a couple of things.
Okay.
First, it can actually take a really long time, especially if it ends up in a landfill.
Mhm.
And second, when it does break down, it releases methane.
Methane's a greenhouse gas.
Yeah, a really potent one.
So even when it breaks down, it could be making climate change worse.
Exactly.
And we haven't even talked about all the resources it takes to make paper in the first place.
Right. The whole process from cutting down the trees to running those big mills,
Yeah.
it leaves a huge mark on the planet.
I've also heard that since paper is so easy to recycle, it's not a big deal to just throw it in the bin.
We all live to think recycling fixes everything right.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's not that simple.
How so?
Well, every time you recycle paper, the fibers get shorter and weaker.
Oh, so you can only recycle it so many times before it's useless.
That's right. And the truth is, a lot of paper packaging still ends up in landfills,
Even if you try to recycle it.
even in places that have really high recycling rates.
So basically, recycling is part of the answer, but it's not like a magic solution to all our paper problems.
We can't just keep consuming more and more paper and think recycling will save the day.
Okay, so if recycling isn't enough, then what are the alternatives?
Well, this report talks a lot about reusable packaging systems.
Like what?
Things like refillable containers and deposit return schemes.
So instead of just using something once and throwing it away,
Yeah, you use it again and again.
what about those companies that want to keep making tons of money off of disposable packaging?
That's where government regulations come in.
Like that new EU regulation we talked about.
Exactly. If they implement it the right way, it could encourage companies to shift away from disposables.
But didn't you say that the paper industry tries to influence those regulations too?
Yeah, that's the problem. It's this constant back and forth.
So we have these big industries pushing back and people who might not want to give up the convenience of just throwing things away.
It is a challenge, but the good thing about this report is that it doesn't just point out the problems.
What do you mean?
It actually offers some real solutions, and it tells us what we can do.
Okay, so what can we as individuals do to actually make a difference?
Well, first, we can just try to be more aware of how much packaging we use.
Okay.
Like when you're shopping online, you can choose stores that don't use a ton of packaging or that offer reusable options.
Right. It's like voting with your dollars.
Exactly. And you can support businesses that are already doing good things,
Like those places with refillable containers.
or stores that let you buy in bulk.
What about when you're eating out?
Oh yeah, you can bring your own containers for leftovers
Good idea.
and choose restaurants that use real plates and silverware instead of disposables.
So it's really about making those little changes in your everyday life.
And all those little changes can add up to a big impact.
I like that it makes it seem less overwhelming.
And it's not just about what you buy.
Okay.
You can also talk to your elected officials about supporting laws that promote sustainable packaging.
And just tell your friends and family, spread the word.
Exactly. The more people who are aware, the better.
I think we all just feel so powerless sometimes.
I know it's easy to get discouraged, but the report reminds us that we do have power.
It's about working together and being willing to challenge the way things are.
You got it.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening, but also a little scary.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to process.
But you've given us a lot to think about and some real ways to make a change.
That's what I was hoping for.
So what's next on our agenda for this deep dive?
In the last part, we're going to look at some arguments for getting rid of disposable packaging altogether.
Completely.
Yep. We're going to talk about the circular economy and what a truly sustainable future for packaging could look like.
Okay, so welcome back to the last part of our deep dive on paper packaging.
Yeah.
So far, we've seen that this industry that claims to be sustainable
Right.
is actually contributing to deforestation, impacting communities, and making climate change even worse.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than it looks.
And recycling isn't the magic bullet solution we all thought it was.
Definitely not.
But I'm really interested in those solutions you talked about earlier,
Right.
like moving beyond disposable packaging completely.
Yeah, the report spends a lot of time talking about that.
Is that even possible? I mean, can we really imagine a world without all that waste?
Well, it focuses on this idea of a circular economy.
Okay, so for those of us who don't live and breathe
All
economics,
right?
what exactly is a circular economy, and how does it apply to something as simple as packaging?
So imagine a system where we practically eliminate waste and pollution
Okay.
because we're constantly reusing, repairing, and repurposing materials.
So it's like the opposite of what we do now. We
Exactly.
just take, make, and dispose of things.
Yeah, it's a linear system that's all about using things up.
But with a circular economy, it's more like a closed loop.
Right, everything keeps going around and around, getting a new life.
That sounds like a huge shift, like a whole different way of thinking about the stuff we use.
It really is. It's about moving away from this throwaway culture we've created.
Yeah. To a culture where we value things and keep them in use.
Exactly. And the report actually gives some examples of companies that are already doing this.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, one exciting area is reusable packaging systems for online retailers.
So instead of getting all those cardboard boxes,
Yeah, they're trying out things like returnable shipping containers
interesting.
and deposit return schemes for all that e-commerce packaging.
I know, I always feel so guilty just flattening all those boxes and throwing them in the recycling bin.
Right. It seems so wasteful. And it is.
Plus, this could actually save companies money in the long run.
Exactly. Less packaging, less waste, lower costs. It's a win-win.
What about other industries? Are they doing anything like this?
Oh, yeah. The food and beverage industry is doing some cool stuff, too.
Okay, like what?
They're coming up with all sorts of refillable containers.
For what kinds of things?
Everything, milk juice, shampoo, detergent, you name it.
So you could just walk into the store,
Yeah.
grab a reusable container, fill it up, and then bring it back to be cleaned and refilled.
Pretty much, it's taking an old idea and giving it a modern twist.
That's so cool, using the best of the past and the present to build a better future.
And it's not just individual companies doing this.
Oh, really?
There's this whole movement toward collaborative platforms and shared infrastructure for reusable packaging.
So basically, everyone's working together to make it easier to reuse packaging.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it would be confusing if every company had its own separate system.
Right. It would be a nightmare.
So having one standard system would be way better for everyone.
Definitely.
So it sounds like this circular economy for packaging is possible,
Yeah.
but it's going to take a lot of people working together and a willingness to rethink how we do things.
You nailed it. And the report really highlights the EU's role in making this happen.
So what can they actually do to make this vision a reality?
Well, they've got that packaging and packaging waste regulation,
Right.
but it needs to be stronger and focus more on reuse and reduction.
Instead of just managing the waste after it's already been created.
Exactly. We need to stop it from happening in the first place.
What else can the EU do?
They can invest in research to find new packaging solutions, and they can incentivize businesses to adopt these circular models.
So basically reward companies for doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
This is all so inspiring, but I have to wonder about the challenges.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what are some of the biggest hurdles we need to overcome to actually make this circular economy happen?
Well, one of the biggest ones is changing how people think and behave.
Because we're so used to just throwing things away.
Right. It's going to take time and effort to convince people to embrace reuse.
We have to be more mindful, plan ahead, and maybe even give up on having everything brand new and perfectly packaged.
It's a total mindset shift.
But we've seen these kinds of shifts before.
That's true.
Like, remember how quickly everyone started using reusable shopping bags?
Yeah, people can change.
And I think people are becoming more aware of how our choices impact the environment.
I agree. And there's a real desire to find solutions.
Plus, I feel like there's this nostalgia for a time when things were built to last.
I think you're right. People miss that.
We don't want to just keep throwing things away after using them once.
It's about rediscovering that value of quality and simplicity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm definitely feeling a sense of urgency.
Yeah, the problem is real.
But I'm also feeling hopeful.
Me too.
We've learned some hard truths about the paper packaging industry,
Mm-hmm.
but we've also seen that a more sustainable future is possible.
And we can all be part of making it happen.
Whether it's by making different choices as consumers, speaking up for change, or supporting businesses that are leading the way.
Exactly. Every little bit counts.
It's been such an incredible journey, and I really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge with us.
Always my pleasure.
And remember, the next time you see a mountain of packaging,
Okay.
take a moment to think about its impact on the world and ask yourself what you can do to be part of the solution.
That's what it's all about.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of paper packaging. We'll see you